Good evening, everyone. This is the final week of the year. Final week of the year Tafshin Pei, 5780. And very soon we're going to celebrate Rosh Hashana, the first day of the new year. And what we want to focus on today is to get a deep understanding of the sound of the shofar, the blowing of the horn that is sounded. That is the mitzvah, it's the main mitzvah, the main commandment of the new year, the Rosh Hashana Jewish holiday. And we all hear it every year. It sounds several times over the different prayers. And in fact, we are listening to the shofar every day, ever since the first day of Elul, the last month of this year. And of course, in a way, there's nothing to understand here. The shofar is meant to echo the simple sound of the heart as it longs to reunite with God, and to sound off its pre-verbal, very what's the word? Genesis-like or pristine kind of primitive sound, the sound of the heart before the intellectualization, before the ideas. And that's the main essence of the sound of the shofar. And that's what we should really have in mind before this introduction, because we are going to intellectualize this a little bit. We're going to go deep into the structure of the blowing and what it means and what kind of psychological and spiritual process we can undergo as we're listening to it. It's really a kind of kavanah, a kind of intention to have with us coming into the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, so that it becomes more meaningful than just this very general, ephemeral kind of, not ephemeral, but general kind of abstract experience of the heart opening up. So this general experience is the main thing, it's the main essence. But we also want to take this down, sort of break it into details and understand more in detail, stage by stage, step by step, what's really going on there. And just to finish this introduction, there's a famous story about the assistant of the Baal Shem Tov. When the Baal Shem Tov asks him to be the Baal Tokea, the one who blows the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. And he was so excited, he said, oh my God, it's a very heavy duty. It's a very tremendous responsibility. So he started preparing all the different Kabbalistic kavanot, all the different Kabbalistic intentions. They're very complex, they're mathematical, and they have to do with permutations of letters. And so in each and every part of the blowing, he would have the particular combination of letters in mind. And he wrote this all down, but the Baal Shem Tov didn't like this kind of approach. He preferred a more simple, straightforward, wholehearted approach, that I'm just going here as a simple Jew blowing the horn. That was the Baal Shem Tov's approach. But his assistant he didn't yet fully understand the mindset, the kind of way of thinking of his teacher, who was the first generation of Chassidut. So what happened is that on the day of Rosh Hashanah, he came up to blow the horn, and he prepared all the different Kabbalistic intentions on one page, and he wrote it all down so he would have it in front of him, so every time he blows he would concentrate on those letters and combinations and so on. And as he came up, and this is in Shul, this is the holiday, this is the moment, all the preparations were for this moment. And he puts his hand in his pocket, and the page isn't there. And he puts his hand in the other pocket, the page isn't there. And he starts going over, and he can't find the page, it was lost. And it's insinuated that it was the Baal Shem Tov's critical view of this, the fact that he didn't like it so much, that's what made the page sort of disappear. So he was at a loss. He didn't know what to do. And you can't run and find it, look for it, and you can't, of course, rewrite it. You have no time. And so he started crying, and then he started blowing the shofar without all of his intentions. But afterwards, the Baal Shem Tov told him that was the best tki'ot, the best blowing that have been heard in a long, long while, and the heavens were reverberating with those tkiyot because they came out of this very sincere and straightforward and unsophisticated place in your heart. So all this is the introduction, because it would appear that we're going to do the opposite in this class, because we're going to go into the details, not in a Kabbalistic way, in a Hasidic way, and understand what they mean. But really, it's just what I want us to have in mind as we're going into this shiur is that we should think about everything that I'm going to teach now as branching off of this very, very simple pre-verbal feeling and experience. So if we have this in the background, we're okay. And now we can go deeper into the ideas. So what we're going to do, now we have a presentation today, special class. So, first we're going to sum up the basic structure of the blowings of the shofar that we all know. Everyone who goes to shul on Rosh Hashana and every day in the morning in the lul knows this, but we're going to go over this. We have 4 stages. The first is called tki'ah. Tki'ah means it's a single blow, a single blast of the shofar. So we have a line here. The line stands for the 2 sound, one long, simple sound. This is called tki'ah. Second part is called shvarim. Shvarim sounds like it's like the line, but it was broken into 3 shorter lines. So it's 2, 2, 2. Shvarim means fragments or fractures, and the idea is that the line or the single long blast was fragmented or broken down into 3 parts. Third blowing of the shofar is called the tru'ah. Tru'ah this is really fragmented. Maybe we should have called the first one not fragments, but maybe something like, pieces. And here it's really fragmented, at least 9, so it's really like the first 3, the 3 that we had just before, again, broken into, each one of them is broken in the same way to 3 more. Usually it's far more than 9, it's like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, like this. And this is called tru'ah. So first we have the 2, and then the 2, 2, 2, which is shvarim, and then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And the fourth and final one is once again the teki'ah, right? Another teki'ah to cap off this experience, right? So we have a long teki'ah and then the 3 parts of the shvarim and the fragmented, I don't know exactly the word in English, the way it goes like this, and then the final line. Now, you can see I left some space on the right side of the screen. Why is this for? Because we should know that originally the Torah itself only speaks about 2 kinds of blowing. Here we have 3, with 3 different words: tki'ah, shvarim, and tru'ah. But originally in the Torah, there's only 2 words that are being used. And the reason we got to 4 is because in the Torah there's only tki'ah and tru'ah. Shvarim is a word that originates in Chazal, in their rabbinic writings. So after the giving of the Torah, after the writing of the Torah by Moses, the Torah given by Moses has only tki'ah and tru'ah. But the thing is that the sages weren't sure how the tru'ah sounds like. One opinion is that it's the 3 parts, 2, 2, 2, and they call this shvarim. And the other opinion is the fragmented one, which is the 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 one, and they kept the original name, tru'ah. But really both tru'ah and shvarim are 2 opinions, 2 versions. They just didn't know, because a long time has passed, and the original silver trumpets, that was the thing that was used in the desert and afterwards in the temple, it was lost. So they didn't have it, and the tradition of how the Torah sounded like was also lost. So you end up with 2 opinions. So how did Jewish law arrive at the structure that we now see of tki'ah, shvarim, tru'ah, tki'ah? Very simple. Because we have 2 opinions as to what the tru'ah is, we need to have both to be on the safe side, just to be sure that we're we're doing the actual Torah that we need to do. We're doing both. And there was another doubt. There was another thing they weren't sure of. Is it first Tkiya and then Truah, or is it first Truah and then Tkiya? And in order to be on the safest side and do all the versions, then what we have is first Tkiya, then the two versions of Truah, and then finally another Tkiya, just to make sure that the order we do all the different orders. And actually, of course, as we know, there's actually more, because in Rosh Hashana itself we also do Tkiya and then just one version of Truah, and again Tkiya and then the other version of Truah. All this is just to make sure that we're doing all the different possibilities. But these 4 stages, 4 levels, that's the main structure. It's the main structure. Generally, in Kabbalah favors structures of 4. And indeed here, this is the basic structure. In ways, the other varieties, or the other iterations, the other ways of blowing the shofar are just variations of this. But this is the main structure. So now, before going into the psychological aspect of each of these stages, we want to go back, just like we started going back and learning about what the Torah speaks about. The Torah only speaks about Tkiya and Truah, and then the sages broke the Truah. Truah has to do with breaking as it is, because the word Truah comes from the root lero'ea, which is to fragment. So either way, the Truah is going to be fragmented. The question is it fragmented into 3 or 3 longish blasts, or many short blasts? But either way, it's fragmented. So very interestingly, even the concept of Truah, what kind of fragmenting, itself is fragmented by the sages into different interpretations. It's beautiful. Regarding the Tkiya is a simple long blast. So there's no argument, there's no confusion. It's very simple. It's a long, simple blast. A single one. So there are no arguments. But once you start breaking things, once you go into the realm of things being broken, then you have all kinds of opinions. I'm reminded of one of the most famous opening lines in all of world literature, and which is, the line goes, all happy families are alike, but all unhappy families, each one is unhappy in its own way. And this is the opening line of Anna Karenina, a book by Tolstoy. I haven't read the book, but I know the opening line. It's a very famous opening line. So, and we have a little bit of this here, that if it's a happy a blast, a simple one, then it's alike. The first one, the last one, they're the same. But once you get into the realm of the broken, the realm of things being fragmented, they can be fragmented in many ways. So now we want to go back even more into the Torah itself and see what was the original purpose of these 2 sounds. For the people of the people of Israel traveling through the desert and receiving the Torah and receiving the silver trumpets, what was the purpose of these 2 kinds of blowing? So, and actually the Torah has 2 commandments as regarding these 2 sounds. What are we supposed to do with the silver trumpets in the desert? And what are we supposed to do with the silver trumpets in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, once our journey is completed? So the Torah is given, we're in the desert, but it prepares us for the arrival at the promised land, the land of Israel. And very interestingly, the 2 kinds of blowing, the 2 kinds of blasts, have similar but different usages. So we want to see all of it. So let's go one by one. So in the desert, the Tkiya, right? We're in the desert, we're traveling, and then the people take the silver trumpet and they blow one long Tkiya, right? 2. So everyone hears this, they know now we should all be congregating around the tabernacle. God is going to speak to us, or Moses is going to speak on God's behalf, and we want to listen to God's voice. So we have to congregate. So the single simple blast in the desert means come, concentrate, congregate around the tabernacle, because there was the tabernacle in the center and all the different tribes all around it, and they would all come because there was this message, a divine message that needed to be heard. So this is the tkiya. It's God speaking and us congregating around God, or Moses representing him. What about the truah, the broken sound? Whether it's what we call truah or what we call now shvarim, either way, the broken sound meant, so when the trumpets went two, 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 or two, 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 whatever it was, it meant now we're moving, continuing to move onwards to the next stage, to the next station in our 40-year journey towards the land of Israel. We're advancing, moving on. The opposite of concentrating. So we can see that the simple sound has to do with everyone coming together. That's why it's one single simple sound. It's everyone coming together to hear God's voice. But the broken sound has to do with now going back into our particular tribes and also moving. And it's not God speaking, it's now God is not speaking. And we're and we have to move forward and advance in our journey towards the land of Israel. All this is in the desert. Now, something very interesting happens. Just after the Torah describes to us these two purposes, it tells us now, one day this journey will be over, and you're going to get to the land of Israel, and you're not going to have a tabernacle, you're going to have an actual temple, and it's going to be stationary, not something that moves from one place to the other. But the silver trumpets will remain, and the two kinds of blasts will also remain, but they will have similar but little different purposes. And now, very, very interestingly, the order that the Torah now tells us of how to use the trumpets is the opposite order. First the truah, and then the tkiya. So the third element is again the truah. So in the desert, the truah was all about moving forward, traveling forward. Now, it's something else. Now, the truah becomes a call to battle. This is the general blowing the horns, calling the soldiers to go into battle. Because in the desert, well, we had some battles in the desert, but not as a state, not as a kingdom, not as a regular normal people living in their land and having wars. We were travelers. We were navadim, how to say in English, I don't remember now. We were people traveling in the desert, and then we encountered some enemies, so we fought them. But now it's different. Now it's the main thing for us is not traveling, the main thing for us is living in the land of Israel. So now the truah becomes a call to battle, a call to war. We're going out to war. What about the tkiya? The tkiya is very similar to what it was in the desert. It has to do with the three festivals in which we come to Jerusalem, Shlosh HaRegalim. In the three festivals that we all come to Yerushalayim, to the temple, the tkiya calls us to come up to Yerushalayim, come up to the temple. Just as we congregated around the tabernacle in the desert, now we're all congregating 3 times a year in Yerushalayim for the festivals of how do you say when someone is ole laregel, pilgrimage, right? The 3 festivals of pilgrimage. Okay, now very interesting. As I said, the order here, as you can see by the numbers, the order is extremely similar to what halachically we end up doing when we're blowing the shofar. We have a tki'ah and a tru'ah that has to do with the desert. Then we have another kind of tru'ah and the final tki'ah. That's the 4 steps we're doing every day in Elul and every Rosh Hashana. It echoes, the first 2 sounds echo the time in the desert, and the second 2 sounds echo the time of redemption, the time in which we're in the land of Israel and we have the temple and so on. And so this is very interesting. And now this helps us move to the next and final and deepest and really the heart of this class, which is what it means to us today going to shul on Rosh Hashana, listening to the blowing of the shofar, remembering in our collective unconscious the silver trumpets, remembering the desert, remembering the time that we lived in the land of Israel in a state that was whole with the temple. And we want to transmit these experiences, these images of congregating and traveling and fighting and then rejoicing at the temple. We want to experience this on the level of our own individual selves, in the level of our hearts. We want to see what it means for us today, each and every one of us, as we're going into shul and we start beginning the new year, and we want to connect to a place within us that is connected to God, that longs for God, that remembers that everything we have is from Him, and reminds us, makes Him our King. That's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. We want to have Him be our King in a way that's authentic, that's really in our hearts. So now let's go back. Before we go back, one important thing. Looking at it this way, we see that the two tkiot, congregating around the tabernacle, rejoicing in the festivals in Yerushalayim, the focus is on God. We can say that the tkiya is a divine voice or a divine sound. That's why it's simple. That's why it's singular. It's one long two. It represents the unity of God. God, there being only one God, and God being the oneness of everything and the one root of everything in our lives. So this is why the tkiya is one long, simple sound. And when we're going to we're congregating in the tabernacle, we want to hear God. When we're rejoicing in the temple, it's all about God. We are not the issue here. However, the two kinds of truot, traveling and fighting, it's more of a human sound. That's why it's broken. Human experience is broken. It's incomplete. When we're traveling, we're not sure what's going to happen to us. We're not sure what the next step will be. How are we going to arrive? When are we going to arrive? What will happen there? What it's going to be like? Who are we going to be in this new place? It's broken. It's an experience of uncertainty. Of course, this is even much more so in the state of living in our promised land. Because although we're safer and we know our place, going into war is far more insecure than just traveling in the desert. You know almost for sure that there are going to be casualties. You don't know who, you don't know how many. You hope that there won't be, but statistically you know that there will be, and it's far more dangerous. So all this is the human level. The two kinds of tki'ah are human, and the two kinds of are divine, and the two kinds of tru'ah are more human. So the order is a divine sound, then a human sound, another human sound, and then again a divine sound. Really, the four stages, it's like going full circle, beginning with God, ending with God. I am the beginning and I am the ending of everything, as God tells the prophet. So now, let's go back to our four stages. And now what we want to do is we want to take these stages and try to figure out what they mean, what they could mean, what could be our kavanah, not the Kabbalistic kavanah which the Baal Shem Tov didn't like, what will be the Hasidic kavanah. The Hasidic kavanah that is only really an expansion or an elucidation of the simple longing for God. So the tkiya is before, I changed the words a little bit to make them more abstract. So the first one had to do with congregating around the tabernacle. So here I use the word concentrate. We want to concentrate something. That's the first single line. And then moving, traveling in the desert, I hear it's called move. It's not, it's traveling, but it's about moving forward, moving yourself, causing yourself, your heart, your soul to move. Right? That corresponds to traveling in the desert, right? The first kind, the truah in the desert, is about we're continuing onwards with our journey. Then the truah of Eretz Yisrael had to do with fighting. So here I use the word to confrontation. We have to confront something, and this confrontation is a kind of battle, a kind of war. I'm abstracting a little bit, so it's a confrontation with something that's hard to confront. This is an abstraction of what it means to go into battle. And finally, celebrating the festivals of pilgrimage in the temple, I use the word rejoice. It has to do with the rejoicing. It's the same sound as the first Kia, but it's different because we have the structure that we looked into of the first two stages having to do with the desert, second two stages having to do with the actual life we're supposed to lead in Eretz Yisrael. So now, of course, the final column is empty because now this is the heart of everything we've been leading up to. This is what we really want to understand now. So now we're going to use Hasidic terms. We're going to use the Hasidic terms used to convey the inner experience we should be having, or that the sound of the shofar is supposed to evoke within us. What should awaken within us. So the first Kia, which corresponds, we're in the desert, and we're congregating around the tabernacle. The Hasidic term for this experience is called Tze'aka. Tze'aka means shout, to shout. The first simple blast, the first Tki'ah, is us crying out, shout, not just crying out, because there's going to be a cry further down the road. It's us shouting, as we shouted in Mitzrayim. In Mitzrayim it says, Vayitz'aku ha'am el Hashem. They shouted, and God heard their shout. Shouting comes from a kind of experience in which I can't take it anymore, and I need God, and I'm trying to break free of my experience. And although it's a very coarse way, or it's a very primal, that was by the way the word I looked for before. Before, I wanted to say that the whole idea of the shofar sound is of a primal scream, a primal sound. So the first sound of the first stage, the first Tki'ah, is giving room to this very simple primal scream. You know, there's this very famous painting by Norwegian artist Edvard Munch. He was a romantic, I don't know if expressionist or romantic, I don't remember now, my art history classes, but it's a very, very powerful image. It's very well known all over the world, and there's a color version, there's a woodcut version of someone standing on a bridge in a city, and for no apparent reason, shouting his heart out at the heaven, and the heaven is very sort of bloody red. And it became symbolic of a kind of primal pre-verbal scream that modern man, because he's standing on a bridge in a modern city, European city, and for no reason he feels he has to scream. Teenagers really like this picture because it reflects their angst. And actually we all have this angst, all ages. But teenagers have less inhibitions, so they express it. But we all have it. And the idea of the first Tki'ah is to give room to this kind of primal shout, primal scream. And we want to shout our heart out. And it means we need God, because as you remember, the two Tki'ot has to do with, it's a divine, it's not, we said a divine voice. Here it's my voice, but it's my voice looking for God. I'm looking for Him. I'm tired of the way my life appears. I need God, I want God, I'm shouting out to Him. Now after the shout is shouted, after the primal scream is out, and it echoes, and it fades, and it disappears, I'm left feeling very, very empty. Because no one is answering my shouts, almost always. Why? Because there's something about the shout that, although it's all about looking for God, it doesn't really give God room, in a way. It's us really shouting out our own need for God, but we are not really connected to who we are, where we are. There's something superficial about it. There's something external about it. It's given room. It's the first stage. We need to have this place that explodes, that goes out, that says, I can't be on my own. I can't make it on my own. I need you. But then there's this silence follows. And now we're going back, and now we can really feel who we are, where we are. And we can ask ourselves, I was foolish to think that God would answer me. Who am I that God would answer me? Do I deserve it? Do I merit it? Am I a prophet? Am I Moses? Am I like my forefathers in the land of Egypt? Who am I? And I start feeling who I am. So the next stage, the human sound, because now we're going to have two human sounds, which is going back to who we are, where we are. The next sound is called sighing. So the three parts of the shvarim, the two, is like a sigh. It's like as I'm going back to feeling where I am and to realize how broken I am. That's why it's called shvarim. Torah has to do with leroea, which is lishbor, and shvarim with a broken heart, is to experience, to acknowledge that God does not have a room in my world. He doesn't have any room in my world, no place, unless I'm willing to acknowledge my broken heart. And the fact that my heart is broken, the fact that it breaks, that's what gives God room. If I'm full of my own shout, where can God come in? All the doors are closed. It's all about me shouting. As I'm realizing this, that I was shouting, I was making a big fuss of myself, that there's something very this painting that I spoke about, Munch's shout, the shouting, there's something about this person is overly self-conscious. He feels himself to be, he fills up the world with his shouting. It's all about him. And in fact, it's a very secular painting. He's not shouting to God. He's shouting at the meaninglessness of the modern world, the absurdity of the modern world. And there was something about the shout that's really, I feel lonely. I feel that I don't have you. But where am I? Am I really trying to become close to God? Am I really, where am I? And then my heart breaks. And this is the sigh. But the thing is, these first two sounds, it's still in the desert. What does it mean to be in the desert? In the desert, it means it's still something theoretical. The desert was like a simulation. Well, you're not living in a real land. You're not plowing the land and sowing the land and reaping, and dealing with routine and making, working hard in your life. You're getting food from above. It's like being in a hothouse. It's like being in school. It's like being a child. You haven't really gotten to work. The next two stages, that's Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel is really landing on the turf, the turf of your own psychological self, really confronting who you are. The breaking here, the sighing and the breaking is just about coming back to realizing who am I, where am I, and I have to work on myself before I can shout to God. So this is why now the sighing becomes weeping. Just as the truah in the desert was all about moving, right? We didn't make the connection to the words that, right? The shouting is concentrating all of my energy in looking for God. I'm concentrating, all going up to the tabernacle and shouting. And then the sighing is me beginning to move, beginning to work on myself, saying, get up and do something. Sigh, at least sigh at who you are and where you are and what you should be doing. But now this sighing or this moving, the moving, the traveling forward in the desert becomes in Eretz Israel going into battle, going into war. Not just traveling, not moving forward, which is hard in itself. It's something far harder. It's really confronting what this world is all about. Not being something theoretical or just being on the move. Being on the move is not enough. You have to really confront what's inside you. And this is you take what's broken and you break it even further. You're shattered. So the weeping, the sound of the truah, the tu is a bit like ha 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 ha. It's weeping. Because once you realize where you are and you start looking into yourself and looking deeper into yourself, you're not just a little bit broken, you become shattered. Because you realize that the most important things in your life you're really neglecting, and the truest essence of your soul you're not really giving it room. And you shout it to God. The shout to God almost seems pathetic now. Who was I to shout at God? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And this is you break up. It's breaking squared. It's not 3, it's 9. You break it and you break it more. And it also means going down into your elementary particles, your elementary components. What is my life made up of? It's reducing yourself to your essence. This is the weeping and the true confrontation of you with your Yetzer Hara, or with your Nefesh Be'emit, with your animal soul, with your earthly soul, with your broken humanity, and what you're doing with it. And you have to acknowledge it, not rise above it, and not fly over it, and not pretend you're in some utopian desert. You need to come into the land of Israel, which is coming into your own land, and meeting your own heart, and not just having it be a little bit broken. It has to be really broken for you. There's 2 stages of breaking one's heart. First, what breaks is what I know to be wrong about me. That's the first part to break. But then there are the bits that I thought were okay. And it's the subtler faults. It's the more nuanced parts of myself that I'm detached from my spouse and from my kids and from myself and from God. It's higher resolution. The breaking of the shvarim into Torah, into the little, is going into the little details. This and that element of my life, and then it shatters me to realize that I have so much work to do. Now there's something amazing. If I take a piece of glass and I break it, it's impossible to mend. But if I grind it back to dust, I can melt it and it's a bit like blowing the shofar. So glass blowing is turning dust or sand into glass. So what happened here was that the first tkiya, I had this glass. The glass was like this feeling of you're everything, God, and I need you, and I'm shouting to you. And then the glass becomes a mirror. I see myself, and the glass breaks. And then I look at the shards, and they break even more, because I realize that I'm lost. I give up on myself in a way. And as I give up on myself, I realize I have so much to mend. It becomes like dust. And the dust can reformulate into a new kind of tki'ah. A new kind of calling out to God, which on the shofar sounds the same as the first tki'ah, right? It's just another long tu at the end. But psychologically, it's totally different, day and night. Because now it comes after all the breakings. It comes after the 2 kinds of tru'ah. After the shvarim and after the tru'ah, after I broke and after I shattered. And I disintegrated. And this disintegration is extremely important to be reborn or remade or rise out of the ashes. The second tkiya is rising out of the ashes of the 2 kinds of tru'ah. Now, is it another shout? We had a shout and a sigh and a weep, right? You should think of it as instructions, right? Shout, sigh, weep. In Hebrew, it's just the noun. It's tze'aka, anacha, b'chiya. So what's the fourth one? Is it shouting? It's not shouting. Shouting came from a place that I did not yet experience the fact that I'm broken. People who shout don't acknowledge their own brokenness. If they were to acknowledge their own brokenness, they wouldn't shout. They wouldn't shout at anyone. Obviously, they wouldn't shout at someone who does something wrong. Who am I to shout? I'm also broken. How can I be critical of something that he's broken, or that he broke, or that he's doing wrong? I have my own things to fix. So you don't shout. You also don't shout for God. Obviously, you don't shout at anyone, because you know you're broken, but you also don't shout for God. You know why? Because shouting, who do you shout for? You shout for someone who's far away from you. You feel that he's so far away from you. It's like on the other end of the river, the other bank of the river, and you're shouting, hoping that he would hear you. And then you realize he doesn't hear you. Why? Because you weren't really close to them. And you weren't really close to yourself. And then you break, and then you break some more, you sigh and you weep. But now, because you broke, and you allowed yourself to feel broken, God has become close. God is close to those who know that their heart is broken. And now I don't have to shout. You know what I need to do? I just need to cry. In English, it has two meanings. Crying, I could have used crying for weeping. But I used weeping because I wanted to preserve the word cry to what in Hebrew we call, and the word cry must come from this Hebrew word originally, kri'ah, same as cry. Kri'ah is to call someone. You don't have to shout when you call someone. You can call, you can even whisper as you call. Come here, I need you. You call to someone who's close to you. What transformed the tkiya from a shout to a cry? The two kinds of tu'ot in between. They made it so that as I'm more conscious of my broken heart, of my own brokenness, of the things that I break, of my imperfections, of my faults, of the things I need to rectify, of how much I can't rectify them on my own. That's the third stage, is that even breaking isn't enough. I feel that I'm shattered. Shattered is I can't even help myself. And again, I come back to the feeling that I need God, but it's totally different. And now God isn't far away, that I'm shouting. There's also something very, very ridiculous about shouting to God. It's as if He's very far away, and the louder I shout, the more He's going to hear me. It's ridiculous. He's everywhere. But I didn't experience that He's everywhere. I didn't feel that He's everywhere. I felt that He was far away. But now, as the more I break, the more I realize I need God, and the more I realize God is with me where I'm broken. And then I don't need to shout, I can just cry. And there's a verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, that we say it every day, Karov Hashem lechol kor'av, lechol asher yikreuhu be'emet. Close is God to all those who cry out to Him. To all those who cry out to Him truthfully. Or we can say authentically, in a way that really reverberates in their hearts. So I think this is an amazing, extremely fundamental Torah, Hasidic Torah, to understanding what the structure of the blasts of the shofar, the blowing of the shofar really evokes and suggests. It's all about listening intently and listening deeply and listening with our hearts. And for me, this goes with me every year to Rosh Hashana, that every time that I hear the first Ki'ah, I feel myself shouting to God, and then I feel myself sighing as I'm able to feel, having blown the shout out of my system. You know, I had to take it out of my system. That's why you need the first shout. I said the first shout is very negative or superficial, but you have to get it out of your system. And once you get it out of your system, you can sigh. And then you can weep the more you realize that what you're sighing over, you can't fix it yourself. You tried so many years, and you have to have God's help. It's the two of you collaborating. And then you cry to God. And beautifully in English, the weeping and the crying somehow goes together because of the dual meaning of the word cry. So this is our class for this week, our preparation for Rosh Hashanah. And I want to bless all of you, and myself included, all of us, that we have a very, very sweet new year, Shana, a sweet and good new year, Shana Tova U'Metuka, and that we're able to combine these sounds, the sound of calling out to God and the sound of calling out to ourselves, and to have them intermesh in the way we just try to present. And Shana Tova, K'tiva V'Chatima Tova. And I'm going to meet you the other side of Rosh Hashanah next year. So Shana Tova. Hi, if you enjoyed this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon is a platform for supporting independent creators. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much.